What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Acting Chops Network. This is your host, China McCoy, home of the industry insiders. And to all my newcomers, welcome. And this is our 12th episode, I am happy to say. And you know how I feel about the 12th episode, right? Let's get it. Bam! The clapper wins again. It's all about the clapper, baby. Anyway, that brings me to mind. When you think of like movie clapper and, when they pow and you go action and then, the scene starts and you get to see the behind the scenes on the DVDs, if anyone remembers DVDs. Hollywood goes back a long way. And I just want to talk about the death of Hollywood. And people are like, well, how is Hollywood dead if they're still making movies? Well, this is what I mean. Since I started in the business since the 90s, Hollywood was God, so to speak, right? They had the big Panavision cameras. There was no such thing as digital. Everything had to be on film, whether it was 16 millimeter or 35 millimeter, but it had to be on film. And if it was on film, usually the film schools had film cameras. So the general public didn't have accessibility like they do now with the cell phones. So during that time, Hollywood was the gatekeepers of everything. So any scripts that you wanted, any movies or TV shows, it had to go through the movie studios. And then for a short time, not minuscule, but, smaller productions kind of broke off away from Hollywood. But they had access to like film cameras. So it still wasn't in abundance. Like anybody could pick up a cell phone nowadays and make a movie, right? That's probably the first reason why Hollywood is dead as well. But you couldn't rent like one of those big Panavision cameras. They were huge and they had these big film reels on them. And they'd be like, they make this noise. And every time you was on one of those big productions, you had guys with their film cameras that they actually took pictures with specifically for the behind the scenes. So like, say if you went to the Chinese theater to watch, I don't know, name an old movie that had something to do with film, maybe Ocean's 11, or you know what I mean? Or if you even go back to the Goonies, back then those guys would have the cameras and they could hold it in their hand. And every time they click the button, it would make that sound like a automatic weapon, you know what I mean? Because they were getting so many shots with that film camera. But the game has changed because once 24p came along, 24p was like, you had your little Panasonic digital cameras, and it was like, wait a minute, we can make movies with these, and they're accepting it. That was the moment that Hollywood died because they no longer could control the filmmaking business. So there's a separation there. So Hollywood, Panavision cameras, gatekeepers, everything goes to Hollywood. Hundreds and thousands of scripts running through Hollywood like a machine. No one else can make movies. Film schools at the time were making, thesis projects or, projects using. So if you got to be on film in the era during the 90s, you swore you were doing something amazing. Like it was something fantastic. You see that film camera and it'd be like, oh, we're shooting on 16. Oh, we're shooting on 35. Oh my God, we have made it. And it was just an exhilarating feeling. But again, once the gatekeepers realized that, holy crap, someone made a movie using a digital camera and it's acceptable, this may look bad for us, and eventually it did. It actually was the death of Hollywood because it was like anything. Anybody that had a pencil didn't mean they could write. Anybody that had a final draft didn't mean they were screenwriters. And everybody that had a digital camera didn't mean they were filmmakers, but they were still making movies with it regardless. And then Canon came along, and then now all of a sudden all these cameras that you could use that were meant for taking pictures now would have video built into the picture cameras, and now you could just shoot a movie on the camera. And it just really, really, really changed the game on not waiting on Hollywood. And it was such an epic moment. And I think it was a win for a lot of creative souls who always wanted to make films. And they realized, wow, we don't have to go to the doors of Hollywood to ask them to make my movie when I could just make my own movie. Whether I use my own money or, whether I use credit cards or whatever it may be, I can do it. And that was freedom for like creatives who really wanted to make movies. And they just didn't have the opportunity to do that. They only dreamed about it. You know what I mean? So everybody's dream was just come to Hollywood and be in a Hollywood movie and walk the Hollywood red carpet. But now these indie films that came along said, well, with or without you, Hollywood, we're still going to make movies. And then they had their own little indie premieres and their own little red carpet walks. And it made people feel like, wow, now we don't really have to ask anyone or ask any permission to stand in our creative glory. So for me, that definitely was the death of Hollywood. But also at the same time, it was a good time when Hollywood was making movies. It just was a great time. Things had a lot of longevity. It was fun being an extra during that time. Like if you were an extra and you were on a movie, like I was an extra in the movie Heat. You know what I mean? If anybody goes back and watch that movie, I was an extra with Tone Loc and them. And it was just great to be in that movie. It was just fun to be an extra. We had to collect all our vouchers and become SAG eligible. And that was a great thing. And it was just a fun time. But I think sometimes with freedom, you lose something. So for instance, here's what I mean. So when the internet came about and freedom came about with the film industry and then Facebook and then, Instagram came along and Snapchat, then a lot of these actors or stars who were stars, some of them are actually online and now they became so accessible. They kind of lost their star power due to the fact, they're always going to be stars, so to speak, but I'm just saying they kind of lost their star power, their fan base, because now everybody all over the world has access to you. I could just go on Instagram and let's say I can click on Denzel is a bad example because he's not on Instagram, but I'm just saying, like, if he was on Instagram, or Keanu Reeves, this is why these guys have star power, because they're not on Instagram or the network like that, so they're not accessible, and being not accessible keeps your star power. But when you're accessible, like The Rock is accessible, so to speak, you know what I mean? So after a while, you just like, I'm just tired of seeing this guy. So if you're tired of seeing him online and you're tired of seeing him in every post, what do you think is going to be like for him when he goes to make a movie? So his movies aren't going to do as well as they should because he's so accessible to the audience online. So again, accessibility, even though you're a powerful star, can be a downfall. This is what I mean when I talk about like Hollywood, the death of Hollywood. It's all the way around. It affects any and everyone. You know what I mean? From the stars to the movie studios. And now the movie studios are competing with hundreds and thousands of independent film companies. And that's just something that, things have to evolve. But anyway, guys, that was just my take on it. If you have an opinion, just hit me in the DMs. Follow us on YouTube at the Acting Chops Network, at Acting Chops Network on YouTube, and Instagram at the Acting Chops or Acting Chops Podcast, whichever one you want to put in. But that's where we are. Always have fun discussing the industry with the industry insiders as well as the public. And if you have any suggestions that you want me to talk about, in the industry, let me know. I think my next episode, someone did bring up to me, I already did one called Quality versus Quantity, but they made a good point. They said, what about quality versus quantity when it comes to filmmakers? And that's a really good point. So that's going to be on my next episode. So until then, see you on the next episode. I'm out.